All right, it is your chance to step aboard the most famous ship of all time. Of course, I'm talking about Titanic this morning. And Titanic, the exhibition in Dallas, has extended its stay through Labor Day due to popular demand. Inside there, you'll experience the true story of the Titanic, get to see what it looked like in person, and hear stories of love and loss told through artifacts, including actual props and costumes from the famous James Cameron film in 1997, and actual props from the real Titanic as well. And we'll get to that a little bit later. With all of this, we are now joined by Mark Locke, who is the creative producer for the exhibition and has also seen the Titanic in person deep in the North Atlantic Ocean as well. Mark, thanks so much for joining me.
Oh, pleasure to be with you. This is great. Love the studio. Love being here. Love being here in Tyler and in Texas with the exhibition.
Well, we certainly appreciate you making the trip from Dallas. I know you were just in Florida a day ago, so
Yeah.
we certainly appreciate it. Traveling is definitely difficult. I get it, but we appreciate the efforts.
No problem. It was a pleasure.
So I want to start with this morning, Titanic, the exhibition. If somebody has not heard of this, I know it pretty much goes all around the world, like you
Yeah.
explained to me earlier this morning. What
Yeah.
exactly is it?
This is a collection of over 350 artifacts. It's a very theatrical experience, full-scale room recreations, the famous grand staircase, a first-class cabin, a first-class hallway, the third-class hallway, the boiler room. We have an iceberg that's actual ice that you walk up to. It's a story that has captivated all of us since it sank in 1912, really since it sailed. You know, we were fascinated by this incredible ship called the Titanic. And of course, once it sank and so many people were lost, it became one of the world's great tragedies. And we still talk about it today. We're still fascinated by it today. And for many, many years, I've had the pleasure and the honor, really, to take this exhibition all around the world.
Yeah, and talk about the backstory to the exhibition. When did it start? And talk about, before we get to the other stuff, about
Yeah.
actually what's inside, much deeper into that.
Yeah.
How did it start and kind of what went into making something like this happen?
Well, for me, I got a call 25 years ago, which cracks me up. It's been that long, from a complete stranger. And he said, "I hear you're the perfect guy to design my Titanic exhibition." Well, I didn't know who he was. I didn't know why he was calling me, because at the time I wasn't in this industry, this business, if you will. But I certainly heard about Titanic. It was right about when Cameron's film was out,
Mhm.
and everybody was talking about Titanic and Jack and Rose, and you got to go see this movie. And of course, it became, at the time, the largest grossing movie ever. And I was excited about the opportunity. This was in Orlando at the time. I live in St. Petersburg, so it was an hour and 45 minutes away. And I thought it'd be a one-off. I helped with that exhibition attraction. It was a little different. But after that experience, right towards the end, the folks that recover the artifacts from the ocean floor saw the exhibition, and they called me and said, "Would you like to be part of this exhibition that travels around the world?" And I couldn't believe it, but very excited to seize that opportunity in that moment. And for the last 25 years, like more than that, I guess 26 years now, I've been in different forms and different exhibitions, been traveling the story and the artifacts around the world, telling this incredible story of the Titanic.
And how long did it kind of take to put together to where you guys were able to display it to a lot of people, of course?
Yeah, that first one out of the box took months because we're starting from brand new.
Yeah.
And then we've built exhibitions, multiple exhibitions that travel around the world. So it takes a year or two if you're starting from the beginning to with a great group of talented people, from writers to designers to lighting folks to graphic folks, musicians, storytellers, and you bring them all together. I become the face of the exhibition, but really the talent and the work is done by so many folks. So you take a year or two to put it together, but at the same time, then you've got to travel it. So when you come into a city, that takes 4 or 5 weeks from opening the doors to a space, setting up the exhibition, and then finally opening the doors to the public.
Yeah, well, it's certainly incredible to see. I'm going to have to go check it out before
Yeah,
it leaves
look forward to
Dallas.
having you. Yep.
Yeah, and then from everything's in there, when somebody does walk in right away, they buy tickets for this,
Yeah.
especially if they plan to go before it leaves Dallas,
Yeah.
what's the first thing you notice? I know there's so many things you can do. We'll get more into it, but
Yeah.
when you first walk in and buy tickets and stuff like that,
Yeah.
what's the first things they can
Well,
kind of notice?
yeah, the thing about buying tickets, let me just jump on that
Yeah.
first because you can go to the, promote the exhibition here a little bit, but you can go to the website, titanicexhibition.com, titanicexhibition.com, and you can buy on the day and the time that you prefer. When the exhibition first toured, it was like tickets on sale, and you'd have to stand in line all day to get in. But now you can say, I want to go on a Tuesday afternoon at 2:30. Well, you'll get in at that time slot. On the website, there are other things like the audio tour, the VR experience. These are part of like the VIP packages. But to your question, when you first walk in, I am so proud of our staff. First of all, that's over there in Dallas with the exhibit. A very enthusiastic, very caring group of people. We take care of you as the guest, as the passenger. But you stand in line, and before you go into the intro theater, you're given a boarding pass. And on that boarding pass is the name of an actual Titanic passenger, the class they traveled in, and a little bit about them. Now, you don't know their fate yet. And I think initially people take it almost like a souvenir, but then they flip it over and start reading about this passenger. And then I think they start to connect as they make their way through a little bit. And now it becomes a little personal.
Yeah.
And at the end of the exhibition, we have a wall of all 2,300 names that were on board the ship, first, second, third, and the crew divided into lost and saved. And people look at that boarding pass and they will not leave the exhibition. It's in alphabetical order, but they still have to find the name. What happened to this person? What was the fate of this particular passenger or crew member? And they find that out. The story becomes a little complete then, if you will, for that passenger and your relationship. But I've noticed over the years, it's not just the passenger's name. It's not just the passenger's life. It's our life. It's your life standing there. You're with your friends or your family. And if there's ever a story in history that speaks to how fragile and how uncertain life can be, it's the story of the Titanic. So that little boarding pass, that piece of paper, I think goes a long way to really connect you with the story and I think with your loved ones as
Yeah,
well.
it sounds like a truly unbelievable experience, and
Yeah.
maybe everybody should give a try if it's in their city or near
Yeah. Yeah.
where they live. Talk about the virtual reality experience a little bit more.
Yeah, for years people have when I tell the story, and we'll talk about that in a bit, I'm sure. But when I tell the story of the diving the ship, people just because it's more people. What's the more people have been in space than have been that deep in the ocean, let alone see the Titanic. Now, of course, space over the years, a lot have gone. But, they'll ask me, "Tell me the story. What was it like? I don't know if I could ever do that," you know? Well, it's like, how do we bring people as close as we can to that experience without jumping in a submersible and going 2.5 miles to the ocean floor?
Yeah.
Well, with VR now, you've got that opportunity. So, at the end of the exhibition, for those who care to buy that ticket, you put on the VR goggles, and, my friend Tom Zoller, who's the producer of the exhibition, and his company brings this exhibition to Dallas. We narrate what it was like because we both went down, and we narrate what it was like to go to the ocean floor. So you get that feeling of getting inside of a sub, going down to the ocean floor, but then all of a sudden it transitions into what the Titanic looked like in its, before it sank, if you will. So you can, as most of your listeners and your viewers know, VR, you turn your head, look to the right, you control the experience and it's been something that's been quite well received.
Yeah, and I do wanna get into, of course, your actual experience seeing
Yeah,
the Titanic there in the Atlantic Ocean, the
yeah,
North Atlantic Ocean.
right.
Um, I know there's so much to talk about with that, but talk about when this happened, why you decided to go down, and view it, and kind of like how scary was that?
Well, it was scary is the right word, you know? It really, it was an opportunity that came along because I was doing the design of the exhibitions. And, I originally it was um what was it? An opportunity to go out and be part of the expedition, not necessarily getting inside of one of the subs. And I said, that's fine with me to be out there, to see the artifacts come up, that sort of thing. I was very excited. So went out there, left from St. John's, Newfoundland, and took a ship to a smaller vessel, but took a ship to the larger vessel, the Academic Keldysh, which is the Russian submersible research vessel, and the Mir 1 and the Mir 2 are the two deep sea submersibles. You talked about the movie earlier. Well, you remember at the beginning where they're on the ship and the elderly Rose is helicoptered out to a ship and they're going down diving,
Mm,
like James Cameron's film.
mhm.
And I can tell you the submersibles were the same that I went down in. That's where the storyline, of course, is different. The way those artifacts were recovered with pulling up the safe and taking a grinding wheel to cut open the safe. That's not the way it is. The way the recovery of the artifacts is very delicate. It's very precise. It's very caring, if you will. But so I went out to the expedition and was watching this all happen around me. And then about halfway through, someone said or asked me, if the opportunity is there, would you like to get inside of one of the subs and go to the ocean floor? Of course, I jumped at the opportunity. I said yes. And it wasn't certain until they posted on the wall the names that were diving and the submersible they were in and the dive number. So imagine dive one, submersible one, or Mir 1 and Mir 2. And then they list the three names. And as I'm looking at the names, hoping to find my name, I'm going down, there were 14 dives, going down these list of 14 different dives. And I'm going through and it's like, no, 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 no. And then finally I see my name towards the end of the list. And of course, it was dive number 13. Not to be afraid or superstitious, but quite frankly, when I saw dive 13, I was like, well, of course, if something's going to happen, it's going to be dive 13. But, as we talked about earlier, getting inside that sub, taking the journey down, first of all, when you get inside, it's very small. You realize how small it is. And it's like, as we talked about earlier, it's like sitting in the front seat of a very small car with two other people for 12 hours. And they secure the hatch down above you and they pick the sub up. And you'll remember this from Cameron's film or numerous documentaries. They
Mhm.
pick the sub up with a crane and put it into the North Atlantic Ocean.
Yep.
And that's where, because you're not really, you're not belted in, if you will. And at that moment, even though it seemed like a very calm day, all of a sudden you're a beach ball on the top of the ocean, and you're kind of holding on for dear life until you start to submerge. And once you get below the ocean surface, pretty much things calm down. But what you notice as you look out your porthole and look right into the ocean, I remember it being a bright blue. It was a bright sunny day, and the blue was almost a Caribbean blue, right?
Yeah.
That kind of turquoisey blue, which
Right.
surprised me. And then we started to descend, like I mentioned, and within 15 minutes, the bright blue fades to black. And for the next 12 hours or so, you're in the darkness. And as we made that descent, of course, it gets colder and colder inside the sub. It's 6 inches of titanium, the sub is. It's like a ball, a sphere. But still, as the water gets colder, it transfers through the titanium and into the sub. So you're putting on a jacket and another pair of socks, and you start to see your breath, and you start to see condensation build up in the sub as you make the descent. I can't say it's comfortable because it's cold and it's tight, and you're not even on a chair. You're on a bit of they call it a settee, kind of a little a platform, if you will, that's not big enough for most people, let alone me, a little taller than most. But still, you're excited. And as we mentioned earlier, just as we were getting towards the bottom, the Titanic sits about 3,800 meters, 2.5 miles down. The pilot starts to take control of the sub. He sits in the middle, got a joystick in front of him to control the sub.
Yeah.
And I felt a very light touchdown on the ocean floor, almost like that small car you're in. If somebody grabbed the bumper and gave it a shake, it was that kind of moment. And as he shut down some of the engines and the propellers, he pointed to my porthole, and I got my face up to that. And I waited, looked out into the black, heard a click, and then just a little moment later, a beat later, the lights started to come up from the sub on the exterior. And I was looking at the ocean floor, but as my eyes moved across the ocean floor, there in front of me was the bow of the Titanic. He took that sub. We flew what felt like flying right up towards the bow and right over that famous bow railing, the king of the world bow railing, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I was just, it was euphoric. It was exciting. It was fun. But as we spent time on the ocean floor, knowing that this was a great tragedy, it was very emotional as well.
Yeah, what was the first thing that went through your mind when you saw parts of the Titanic there?
Just first of all, that I couldn't believe physically where I was, right? At 2.5 miles down, where few people go. I have to be honest with you. The first emotion was excitement, right? And then as the hours went by on the ocean floor, you kind of went through these ebbs and flows of being excited. Look, there's that. There's a lifeboat, damn it. There's a porthole into a promenade deck. But then it became emotional, and you thought about those passengers. And as I mentioned earlier, one of the moments was going by Captain Smith's cabin alongside the ship. And by the way, one of the things, people always ask, why is Titanic so popular? Why do we still talk about it? Well, largest moving object made by the hands of man, right? The maiden voyage, Captain Smith, the celebrities, Captain, and then, of course, the tragedy, has cemented this story in our minds forever. But I think one of the reasons, too, once the discovery was made, Titanic ended upright on the ocean floor. Remember, it fell for 2.5 miles, and it was tumbling and it was turning. And then the two halves are separated by about one-third of a mile, and they crashed to the ocean floor. But that bow that we're familiar with could have landed on its starboard side, on its port side. It could have landed upside down, but it landed as if it's still sailing today. So I think when you see that on the bottom, and that was the first thing that I saw, you just you connect with it in a very real way, because there she is. She's no longer sailing proudly on the ocean surface, but she sits there as a memorial, a proud memorial on the ocean floor.
Yeah, with how it sits there on the ocean floor, has that
Yeah.
made it easier to recover artifacts from the Titanic, or has that made it harder?
Neither, because what's interesting and what I appreciate, an international court has determined that the artifacts that are recovered can't be recovered from the Titanic itself, meaning you can't go and pull something off. You can't even go inside. The objects that are recovered are in an area called the debris field.
Okay.
Imagine when that ship broke in half and it tumbled and it turned. Well, this is a city, if you will, and its belongings are being tossed out. So that area around the ship, which is quite large, where things have landed, everything from China to leather suitcases to shoes to silverware, parts of the ship, those are all littered around the ship itself. And that's where the artifacts from the ocean floor are recovered in the debris field.
And you actually, I know you actually brought some actual items from the Titanic in our studio here
Yeah,
today. Unfortunately,
yeah,
we cannot show our viewers because they're very fragile, and of course, they're actual things from the Titanic. But I'll put pictures up right now.
yeah.
But Mark, talk about each of them as I put up on the screen, the significance of them and kind of the history
Yeah.
behind them.
Yeah. Just to be clear, this exhibition in Dallas, the artifacts of the ocean floor are in another exhibit, but this exhibition has 350 artifacts, some with aboard the Titanic, direct ties, but not from the ocean floor. But these are quite interesting, I think. The first one that I brought today, as I'm looking at it here, is a first class tea set, meaning not a set, a saucer and a teacup, and it was the best of the best for the first class passengers. Titanic, as we know, had three classes: first, second, and third. They were identified on those pieces of china with the White Star Line logo. The reason is Titanic had a sister ship named the Olympic that was identical, virtually identical, that sailed before Titanic. And then later, a ship called the Britannic, it sailed as well. So you don't put Titanic on things, you put White Star Line, right? That identifier. But this one doesn't even have that. That's because it was very exclusive. It was for first class passengers that had a promenade deck. And it was made by the company Spode, which is a famous, to this day, a famous china maker, cobalt blue and gold. And the reason we have it, and it wasn't on the ocean floor, but yet we have it, and it was aboard the Titanic when Titanic sailed on April 10th, 1912, pulling out from its moorings there at Southampton. It went on to Cherbourg, France next, pick up passengers, and then to Queenstown, Ireland, what's called Cork now. And some passengers book passage just from Southampton to Cherbourg or to Queenstown. Okay. Well, there was a first class passenger, a woman, who saw this wonderful piece of china and said, "You know what? I'm going to take a little souvenir from the Titanic," of course, not knowing what was to happen. And she got off in Queensland. That was her plan. But she took this first class teacup and saucer with her, and that's why we have it today.
Wow.
Yeah, crazy story, right?
That's incredible because I
Yeah,
was gonna say if it was recovered from the ocean floor, it
yeah.
probably wouldn't look like it does. Of course, if you
Well,
I mean, but, obviously the restorations and stuff like
yeah,
that, but I know there's no metal, so it's not gonna rust,
yeah,
but you probably still, at least me, I wouldn't expect it to look like it does if you could see it here in person.
yes. Now, surprisingly, the conditions on the ocean floor, no sunlight, for many reasons, ideal for some things to be preserved. But china and crystal, some of those pieces that were found in the ocean floor, they didn't break. They look fantastic. But things like that are more organic, like wood, not survived hardly at all. But leather suitcases, because of the tanning process, the chemicals used in leather or to tan leather, those survive. But speaking of the grand staircase, I love this little piece that we've got here today. This is a piece of from the grand staircase. And when, of course, the grand staircase that we're familiar with, right, where Jack met Rose at the clock, and that love affair started to catch fire, if you will. But it was where the rich and famous were to be found and to be seen. And when Titanic sank, of course, the recovery ship that was closest to Titanic that heard the distress signal, the Carpathia, arrived too late to save anyone that happened to not get into a lifeboat. But so that was the recovery ship for people. But the White Star Line, days later, hired ships to go out and recover the bodies that were still on the ocean surface. And one of those ships was called the Minia. It was a cable laying ship, meaning laying like it says, a cable that would lay down that you'd lay on the ocean floor for transmissions back and forth eventually. And the ship's carpenter, William Parker, was on board that ship. And of course, he talked about it being just a horrific couple days as they recovered bodies. But being a carpenter, he saw this bit of debris, and it was wood with a detailed molding. And he pulled it up, and it was later identified from the grand staircase. And he made a frame out of it as a tribute to the passengers that were lost aboard the Titanic. And that frame survives, of course, and part of that frame is in the exhibition.
And then the final item.
Yeah. This is not on the ship, but very, I think, very telling. It's a simple postcard, and Leonard Taylor was making his first sailing on any ship at all across the Atlantic, and he was an attendant in the Turkish bath. The first class passengers had a private swimming pool, they had a private gymnasium, and a Turkish bath, kind of a cold plunge, if you will. And his job was to be the attendant. And this postcard, this photograph on the front, was taken at Southampton. And the next day it was turned in, which had to be amazing, 114 years ago,
Mhm.
turned it into a postcard the next day. And he wrote on this, he wrote this to his mother. And he was saying, "Look how enormous this ship is. You can read it on the back. And my digs," he called them, "my digs are quite comfortable and spacious." And he sent this to his mother to express how excited he was to be aboard the Titanic. Well, as fate would have it, he was lost in the sinking. His body was never recovered, only 19 years old. And once his mother was notified, of course, that had to be about as tragic as anything for a mother to hear that her son had perished. But days later, the postcard arrived, telling his mother how excited he was to be on the ship. And that postcard is part of the exhibition.
Well, they're certainly all incredible items. I was thinking about this.
Yeah.
At least with the two items that have direct ties to the Titanic, they were on the Titanic, but
Hmm.
not, of course, recovered.
The ones we have today, right?
Yeah, but not recovered in the wreckage at the
Right.
bottom of the sea.
Right.
But since we do have, we know that
Yeah.
when it comes to auction, I'm sure there's been some items from the Titanic that have sold at auction. With these items here today, how much would you say? I mean,
Yeah.
there's probably no telling, right?
There's no telling, but you're right. Maybe this is too insignificant of a term, but memorabilia, if you will, uh, pieces that were aboard the Titanic, uh, memories of passengers that were aboard have auctioned for incredible amounts
Mhm.
over the years. In fact, there was a recent auction, I think it was a postcard as well within the last 6 months. I'm forgetting what it went for, but it was extraordinary, of course. What's great is our collection uh, is um, is by one gentleman named Rene who lives in Canada, and he saw the movie A Night to Remember when he was a kid. Now, this was a fascinating movie about the sinking of the Titanic before Cameron's film. But as a little boy, he saw that movie and just became fascinated with the story, and he started to collect. First things that were, you know, less significant and probably less valued, but he's put together over the years. That the little boy's enthusiasm hasn't waned, and he's put together one of the great collections of Titanic artifacts related to the Titanic, White Star Line, Olympic, and that's the collection we have in the exhibition. And he's never, pardon me, he's never auctioned or sold anything. It's just too personal to him. But
Right. I
he
totally
loves to
understand.
share it, and that's how he shares it in the exhibition.
Yeah, I totally understand the personal aspect of
Right.
that. Letting go of something like those items that he has, I couldn't
No,
imagine.
it's too personal to him, too much a part of his life. And it's always great to see he and his wife when they install the artifacts because they came to Dallas. And once all the theatrical stuff is done and the lights are up and the music is playing, the graphics are in place. And remember, we have like, I guess it's 14, 15 galleries. So it's a very chronological story. You start, we didn't talk about this earlier, but you start with an intro film and kind of getting everybody up to the same speed, if you will, because people come to this exhibition with extraordinary amounts of knowledge, far more than I have ever had, and they'll tell me things, especially children. Right? Children are just, did you know? Did you know this? Well, once that film that brings everybody up to speed about the story, the doors open, and now you're where Titanic is being constructed in Belfast. You're in the design room, the drawing room, and there's a 15-foot model of the ship, and you're seeing these incredible photographs of the ship being built. Then you move into the day of departure, the excitement of what that day was, and you walk up a gangway and into the ship itself. You're in the first class area, and you walk towards these doors. Remember the doors that opened up into the first class dining hall in the film? They're kind of famous, if you will.
I believe
Yeah,
so.
yeah, but when you see it, you'll go, "Oh, I remember that."
Yeah.
You walk towards those and you turn to your left and there's a first class hallway. That's always fun because people are like, "Oh, there it is." I feel like I'm on board the ship. You walk down that hallway, you walk into an area that displays many artifacts, mainly from the dining rooms, the menus, things like that. And there's a recreation of a first class parlor suite. So you see how the other half lived, if you will, into the grand staircase, as we talked about earlier, down a third class hallway, into the boiler room, the hardest job on the ship, men working 12-hour shifts, shoveling coal into the boilers to keep her going. Of course, tragically, they were the first to know there was a
Yeah.
problem, right? When that water
Yes.
rushed in and the watertight doors started to come down, hoping to save the ship. That's why the ship was called practically unsinkable by the publication was called the Shipbuilder magazine, and this was a brand new safety technology that if there was a hole in the ship, right, somehow the ship was breached, well, the watertight doors would come down and seal it off, and the ship wouldn't sink. The tragedy of Titanic, when they rang the bell above, by the way, after going to the promenade deck, then you face the iceberg and you see the bell and you realize this is the moment, iceberg right ahead. Well, you remember when they made the call from the crow's nest to the bridge, they tried to turn the ship. And the ship took a while, like a big ship does,
Yeah.
for it to turn. And it just looked like it was going to avoid the iceberg. But unfortunately, underneath the waterline, the iceberg scraped along the ship and started to puncture and poke and open up too many compartments
Hmm.
of those individual watertight door compartments. So the ship, of course, took on water and got heavy in the bow, if you will, meaning it filled up with water in the bow section. And it took 2.5 hours for the ship to sink. And that's when Captain Smith made it to the bridge and he got what happened. They had a full stop. People could see the iceberg. It was right there that they hit. Thomas Andrews, the ship's designer, came to the bridge. He opened up the plans for everyone to look at. He went down and did an inspection to those watertight compartments, and he knew too many had been breached. And when he explained that to Captain Smith, he said, Captain Smith asked Thomas Andrews, "What are you telling me?" He says, "Sir, the ship will sink." He said, "This ship can't sink." And Thomas Andrews looked at him and said, "Sir, it's a mathematical certainty." And he knew, Thomas Andrews and Captain Smith knew, there weren't enough lifeboats on board the ship. The rules and regulations didn't require more lifeboats, although the original design had more lifeboats. But the folks at the White Star Line thought, it obstructs the view of the ocean. We don't need it. This is an unsinkable ship. The arrogance, if you will,
Yeah.
of that, and the confidence, but arrogance as well. And that moment where Captain Smith realized his ship was going to sink, and they sent out distress calls, and no one was answering close enough to come and save those passengers. He knew not only that he was going to lose passengers and crew members, but he knew he was going to go down with the ship as well.
Yeah, what was it's been a couple years since I've watched the movie, James Cameron's movie.
Yeah.
Whatever happened with the captain? Do we know exactly what happened to him? Of course, he went down with the
He
ship.
went down
but-
with the ship. It's interesting, conflicting reports.
Yeah.
He was, as I mentioned earlier, people loved this guy, not just because he was so accommodating and so gracious to his passengers, first, second, and third passengers alike, but he was really known as the millionaire's captain. Like, if you want to really get, a great voyage, make sure you're on with Captain Smith, because he was the captain of other ships as well. But there are varying reports, and I certainly wouldn't want to cast aspersions on Captain Smith, but that he kind of got a little bit shell-shocked, if you will. You see that in Cameron's film. He kind of was a bit when he knew the fate. He went into a bit of a haze, if you will. Now, that's not for certain, but he was last seen on the bridge, and when the ship went down, when that violent moment of, now it's really, the bow is going down first, and the stern is coming up out of the ocean, and the ship breaks in half. He was on the bridge and went down with the ship. But how he took control, as you want a captain to do, or maybe how he didn't take control, is still up for debate.
And then with of course, the famous James Cameron movie in
Yeah.
1997, if I'm not mistaken, there was actual props from the movie
Yeah,
at the exhibition.
Yes, yeah.
Talk about that.
Yeah, of course we love the film, and rewinding to the beginning of our conversation about me, that first opportunity to design the exhibition, I went and saw the film and was captivated by it as well, and didn't know that this would be the next 25 years of my life. But it just, as we talked about earlier, just the most popular film of all time up to that point. So people love the movie. And the last gallery in the exhibition is the movie gallery. And we've got scripts, and we've got costumes. We've got the Heart of the Ocean, the famous necklace that they were in search of there in Cameron's film. That all props. Something I find kind of fascinating is there are life jackets that are from the film, but on the back of them are ball bearings that kind of move, big ones, like 2 inches in diameter. And those are attached to the back of the life jacket or the front. And that's because, remember in the film when the ship starts to go down and people are zooming down the decks, right? Sliding down. Well, in real life, you probably wouldn't go down with that kind of speed or that kind of accuracy, if you will. But because the actors, the extras, if you will, were wearing these life jackets that let them kind of, once the ship was, because it was a full-scale recreation of the ship in parts. That's why you see folks zooming down the decks as the ship is sinking, and that's because of these prop life jackets, if you will, with the wheels on them, the ball bearings.
Yeah, really cool. Have you met James Cameron?
I have.
I was about to ask that.
Yeah.
What was that like? What was he like? in person?
Amazing. He came to an exhibition in of all places, Oklahoma City, years ago, so not too far away. And his wife, who she was from there, and she also played the elderly or the granddaughter of Rose, the elderly Rose. Do you remember? She was in the helicopter that went out to the Keldysh, the ship looking for the art for the going down looking for artifacts. And he, as I recall, it was during the holidays, so he was visiting her family. And, it was the exhibition, and then that night was a wonderful formal dinner and, black tie event. And he came and, we met for the first time, and he didn't know at that point that I'd also gone, like he has,
Yeah.
gone down to the ocean floor. And he couldn't have been more gracious and more, uh, excited about being there, and it was such an honor to have him there. And I have this wonderful photograph of us looking into an artifact case, and him looking, and he's asking a few questions of me. I'm asking hundreds of him
Right.
because, of course, a great filmmaker, but also somebody that cares about the oceans and has done amazing work as far as submersibles, building his own submersible to go to the deepest part of the ocean. So this is not just a movie director that took it lightly; he took it very seriously. The research and in this case, the wreck of the Titanic.
Yeah. Has he been to Titanic the exhibition? Has he checked it out?
Oh, that was that night.
Oh, it was that night.
Yeah, that was that. That was at the Sorry, I should have been more clear
Oh,
about
you're
that.
fine. You're fine.
That was we went through the exhibition together with other folks, and then we had the dinner, the formal dinner that night. So it was funny because when I was told he was coming, or there was a chance he was coming, full disclosure, inside I'm going, he's not coming to Oklahoma City. I mean, we've been in L.A. and Chicago and London and New York and Tokyo,
Yeah.
but he's coming to Oklahoma City, and the reason was the tie-in with his wife's family there in Oklahoma City in that area.
Well, how about that?
Yeah, fantastic.
Just incredible.
Yeah.
And then I wanted to get if anything else you didn't cover about when people are going to buy tickets and of course
Yeah.
go to Titanic the exhibition. What else did we cover here today that people? I'm
Well,
sure there's a lot more.
We covered a lot. I think it's always important to know that this exhibition is made for folks of all ages, and it's so gratifying to see a child talking to their parent, talking to their grandparent, or a combination of all those things. So it's a very family friendly show. It's like you said, we've extended the exhibition there in North Dallas. The website is thetitanicexhibition.com. One more time, audio tour available, VR available. But something that if folks from Tyler are making their way to Dallas for whether it's a Rangers game or to go to a museum or just to see a concert, I think you'd be happy to take in the exhibition as well.
I think a lot of people would. And then finally, one of my final questions here, Mark.
Yeah.
We talked a lot about definitely the history behind the Titanic this morning, and of course the story. Is there anything that you can tell us that maybe a lot of people don't know about the Titanic story? Maybe there's a lot of stuff about it. Like, is there anything that maybe a lot of people believe about the Titanic story, but maybe isn't true? Is there any fun facts you can tell us?
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Once again, I never want to portray myself as a historian or an expert. I think the thing that comes to mind when you ask that question is what and we seem to do it in many areas of life, is we make we want to make more than is there. Was it faulty steel of the plates? Were the rivets faulty? There's even folks that believe that wasn't the Titanic that sank. It was the Olympic, and they made it all up, and those sorts of things. The historians and the experts for years have been studying this ship, and it's a simple story in many ways. It was a story of excitement and arrogance, and wanting to get the headlines in New York when you arrive a little early because of just a little side note, the competition with the White Star Line was with another company called the Cunard Line. And the Cunard Line was talking about speed. And Titanic wanted to focus on luxury.
Mhm.
And when they were ahead of schedule, the director of the White Star Line told Captain Smith, boy, it'd be great to arrive in New York early. And then we really got the Cunard Line. We got luxury and we have speed. I tell that story only to say In the exhibition, we tell the true story. And as far as little nuggets that are out there, sometimes almost conspiracy theory type stuff, just look to the experts, look to the historians for the real story, and that's what we try to do with the exhibition.
Yeah, one of my final questions here
Yeah.
before I forget. I heard it was a couple years ago I saw this. Is it true that the Titanic there in the North Atlantic Ocean only has so many years left before it's officially
Well,
gone, or is that not true?
there's so many years, of course, because eventually the ocean will take back the Titanic.
Mhm.
It'll be nothing but a stain at the bottom of the ocean. But when I dove the ship the first time in 2000, so 25 years ago, this August, September is going to be 25 years. Cracks me up. Then they were talking about, well, it's only got 20, 25 years left. Well, she's still going strong. Now, the recent dive, an ROV dive to take to map the area and to look at the site and look at the ship, great video and great photographs. The bow railing, a portion has now broken away, so it's going to be gone, but not in our lifetime. We'll still know it as the Titanic, but eventually it'll be gone. That's why, people will ask me, what about recovering artifacts? This is a spot of a great tragedy. Should we just leave it alone as a memorial?
Mhm.
And it's a good conversation to have. And I think there are valid opinions on both sides. But with so many things throughout history, we want to remember them. We want to remember them with dignity and honor. And when the artifacts are recovered as they are with dignity and honor, I think then they come to the ocean surface, they're conserved, they're preserved, if you will, for generations to come. So long after the ship itself on the ocean floor is gone, the artifacts will remain and continue to tell the story of the Titanic.
Absolutely. And then finally, Mark, where's next for Titanic the
We're
exhibition
about
after
ready
Dallas?
to announce. Haven't yet.
Oh, okay.
You'll be the first to know.
Oh, great. Okay. I didn't even know. I just thought of
Yeah.
it right now. I'm like, well, I want to ask him. And
Yeah.
I didn't know if you guys had any plans yet.
Oh, yeah. By the way, this particular exhibition went from Singapore to Los Angeles to Chicago, now here to Dallas, and the next city to be announced soon. So Dallas and Tyler being so close, you're in good company with some of the great cities of the world, and we're so proud of the exhibition. And just look forward to seeing folks from Tyler over to see us at Titanic the exhibition.
All right, Mark, thanks for coming in. I know you made a trip from Florida and then Dallas and, of course, here to Tyler.
Yeah.
So thanks for coming in and explaining everything for us and certainly sharing some unbelievable stories.
Oh, it's been a pleasure, and you're doing a great job. This is a great way to bring information on an extended level to folks. So thanks for that, and thank you for having me today.